This is our final session of our 5-day event, focus on US-India relationship. We started with Vice President Pence, and yesterday we had Prime Minister Modi, and then we have a series of cabinet rank secretaries and ministers. And to me, this final session is very important because it is important to understand the corporate role and individual role activities that play in the COVID era. And we were talking earlier how the impact it has been working from home. The question is, how do you basically impact working from home while continuing with the CSR program? We have a eminent group of panelists. We have Aloka, Nehal, Asha, and led by Priya, she is the founder and CEO of Samhita Social Venture. So I'm going to hand over to Priya and Naik to take the lead. And once again, thank you for joining us, and thank you all of you to be the lead in the CSR program in India. Thank you, Priya. Over to you.
Thank you, Mukesh. Really, thank you for inviting me to be a part of USISPF's annual leadership summit. I've been following the terrific set of conversations that you facilitated over this past 1 week, and I'm just so delighted to have Aloka, Asha, and Nehal here. I think while the last few months have been extremely difficult for all of us, and we've seen really, just the heart-wrenching impact on people's lives and livelihoods, what has been amazing is to see how quickly government, corporate sector, philanthropic organizations, institutions like USAID, social organizations have all come together to take a very collaborative, coordinated, quick response to sort of fighting this crisis. For example, in the last 3 months, we've set up 2 alliances. The first is called Revive. It's a 50 crore returnable grant facility. It's the first of its kind in India, to really help 100,000 of India's workers and MSMEs that are part of corporate ecosystems to regain their jobs and livelihoods by giving them financial assistance and technical support. Revive is supported by 3 American foundations, including the Michael and Mazumdar Foundation, the Media Network, and Ford Foundation, to really create this returnable grant instrument that allows a funder to impact 8 to 10 times the number of people and create a 22 times income multiplier. Becomes very relevant at a time when resources are very scarce, needs are increasing by the day, and corporates understand that the only way they see business recovery is if individuals and small enterprises that are a part of their business ecosystems also get the support to quickly get back on their feet. This has also been an extremely sort of interesting mechanism to bring together all kinds of resources, philanthropic resources, corporate resources, government schemes, etc., to really create this highly collaborative, responsive facility. The second thing that we've done, again, in the last few months, is created something called the India Protectors Alliance, which is supported by the Gates Foundation, Unilever, RBL Bank, and 14 of India's leading companies, to not just respond to the government and strengthen what the government is currently attempting to do, and it really is an incredible amount of effort that's gone in, but also to build capabilities of 500,000 of India's health and sanitation workers to respond effectively to COVID, particularly as the disease spreads very rapidly. With that, I think it's, in normal circumstances, to put alliances like this together to really leverage a lot of corporate support would have taken many, many months. But to see all of it come together so quickly and really have conversations that are driven by trust more than anything else, has been phenomenal to see. With that, I just wanted to turn to Asha. I know that the Caterpillar Foundation is really committed to transforming communities to be stronger, more resilient, and more sustainable. So tell us a little bit about, in these sort of difficult times, how are you helping your communities, both in India and the US, to be more resilient and combat the crisis both immediately as well as in the future?
Thank you for that, Priya, and thank you to USISPF for the opportunity to talk about this particular topic, especially after listening to PM Modi's address yesterday, where he emphasized on community and collaboration. So it's great to have this conversation following that. Caterpillar has had a long history in India since 1930s in the development of India. So for us, being in India and being part of the community is very much in our ethos. Specific to Caterpillar Foundation, and as well as Caterpillar India, our mission is really about building resilient communities. So when we talk about COVID-19 and a pandemic, I think we're well positioned, at least from a mission perspective, to focus and to react very quickly, because a lot of our programs were focused around how you build about a resilient community. Two ways in which I think this particular pandemic has devastating effects. It started as a healthcare crisis, but soon now, as we all know, is becoming an economic crisis. For Caterpillar, really, it is about looking at our own backyard and understanding how are we impacting these communities across the globe, but also looking at communities specifically in India, and how do we engage on specific focus areas such as looking at the workforce and understanding how do you build up a workforce that has the economic empowerment within their own communities. You are looking at folks where they can be in their own location, so place-based employment. And on the flip side, really understanding how can we support them from a sustainable infrastructure standpoint. So those are the two areas with which we approach our CSR. Our employees continue to be a significant component of our commitment. And from a disaster standpoint specifically, basic human needs has been the driving force for us, whether it's looking at opportunities to support in food insecurity or access to basic services like water and energy, et cetera. So just specifically on COVID-19, we realized that it can't be a solution that fits all, because in every country, we're facing something very different. And so very specifically, although our response was very much global in nature, for us in India, it was very important to understand where are some of the specific issues that we need to focus on. And that requires us to work with our local team. So Caterpillar India really stepped up to support our local communities from Tamil Nadu to Maharashtra to Karnataka, and working with the police force, working with the local hospitals, working with food banks to really be able to build up that ecosystem. And when we look at disasters, you have the immediate response, and then you have the long-term relief efforts. So although we can't say that we're out of COVID-19 yet, since we're all dealing with it today and working from home, I think that our goal is really to be able to look at that sustainable solutions that we're able to provide. And for us, that is really in the workforce space and looking at sustainability and how can we address some of the solutions within that. So looking forward to speaking more to some of those examples and solutions in this panel.
Thanks, Asha. Aloka, I know that HSBC has committed not just a very significant amount of money to respond to COVID-19, but you've really engaged very deeply with your NGO partners to build your resilience. Just tell us how you've supported the government, your NGO partners, and communities to respond effectively to the crisis in the last few months.
Sure. So thank you, Priya, and thank you, USISPF, for having me in this session. I think Asha covered it very well in terms of, this is a crisis of something that we have never witnessed ever in our lifetimes, as a result of which we were all kind of taken aback, and kind of the crisis was massive. So how we looked at is actually, we looked at it from three lenses. The first, of course, was on immediate recovery, because, when the pandemic hit, you typically had several stakeholders approaching us, from the government to the civil society, and the first time we saw a lot of collaboration. And in terms of actual support, we went ahead with immediate recovery support, and which Asha mentioned. I think the phase that we have gone through is, it started with medical. It was quite early in the day. It was March, in fact, and slightly before the lockdown, the Maharashtra government approached us, and we worked very closely with them. So it started with the medical support, went on to, ration and food. And now, if you ask me, of course, still medical and ration are the two critical components that, we're receiving requests for. But at the same time, we're also getting requests in terms of recovery. So when we say recovery, we're talking about livelihoods, we're talking about education. So I think we are slowly now entering that phase of recovery. So that is where, in terms of the community programs are concerned. And this is something, Priya, what we have realized is that no amount of investment is enough with the kind of damage that we have seen. So as a result of which, I think over the next 1 year across 2021, we will have to see, and beyond, we have to see a large amount of investment if we really have to kind of bring back, the communities who have been impacted so badly back to where they were. So that's something which is going to be important. I think the other piece that we really concentrated on is actually working with our nonprofits. Because we have a very large portfolio of nonprofits that we work with. We work with about 55 nonprofits directly, and overall we work with about 160 NGOs indirectly through our program, skilling program. And so it's a very, very large number of nonprofits that we work with. And the first thing we realized is that we need to get in touch with them to see what was happening, because we were getting news that it was not possible for all funders to keep their commitments. That's something kind of came to us as a surprise, but we do understand, because it's a very different thing that we are facing. So what we did was we actually connected with our partners to understand what the risks were when it comes to their people, when it comes to their financials, and when it comes to their other risks. So that was an exercise that we did with our direct partners first, and we actually worked with one of our partners, which is Impact Foundation, Dasra actually. And we worked with them to actually put together a workshop only exclusively for our partners on building resilience of our partners. And the entire exercise was to understand that what they were going through. So not just understanding, but also providing a toolkit for them to actually assess the risks, and then, and how to deal with it to go for a sustainable recovery. So that's something that we focused on. I think another thing that we brought in is that, we also saw leadership crisis around this thing, because, I don't think any leadership has seen this kind of crisis in many years. And it was therefore quite heartening to see all leaders of NGOs actually showing interest in terms of putting their time, and the leadership team actually coming together to figure out that what needs to be done. And in fact, we have at the CEO level engagement. So our CEO, Surendra Rosha, he actually spoke about leadership in crisis and how we have managed it at the company's level. And for them, I think the two big things that is work in progress is, I think the nonprofit sector will have to work on business continuity. I think business continuity is something that, companies like Caterpillar and us, we have a proper plan in place, and therefore we have been able to operate without any glitches as such, during this pandemic. And so this is business continuity, how to do it and all, and this is something that we are working on. And the second is also to diversify your risk. I think these are the two things we are working with our nonprofit partners. So this is something that we've already kind of dealt with our direct partners, and this is something that going forward we want to cover our indirect partners as well. But we do see a lot of value in it, I think, because the nonprofit sector has actually shown how critical they are in times of crisis, right? So therefore, I think it's a very, very important tool, and we will have to build that capacity to ensure that they function in the best possible way. So I'll stop here, Priya. Any questions you have?
Look, I think, you've been one of the few champions of the nonprofit sector, because in the last few months, we've seen particularly nonprofits, just go through a financial and almost an existential crisis at a time when they've really had to step up their commitments to their communities. We've seen education NGOs really do a lot of this food distribution, not because they wanted to, just because they had to, right? And I think it's really funders like you who've stayed, really kind of had their back and have shown, not just trust and commitment, but really held their hand to sort of move forward and also deal with the crisis. So really exceptional work. Nehal, I wanted to just talk to you about this. And, Aloka and Asha both talked about the fact that you have, a moment where resources are very scarce, needs are just, it's not just critical to respond, but the scale of response is overwhelming, right? USAID has always done a fabulous job of being an honest broker and facilitating these partnerships amongst donors, government, civil society, and the private sector. and your role is more important than ever at this point in time. So tell us a little bit about the initiatives that you're currently championing and how you've managed to catalyze some of this private sector support as well.
Thank you for that, Priya, and thank you again, USISPF, for this opportunity. You're absolutely right. I think unknowingly, of course, we had done a lot of the groundwork for the last several years to establish partnerships with the private sector without any idea that we were going to be in the situation we're in today, of course. What sort of initially got triggered was this basic desire to do three things. First and foremost, we needed to get an understanding of not only what other donors were doing and what the government was doing, but really what the private sector was doing, and then make sure we were relaying that information in a very timely manner to Washington, so there could be clear communication to where we could then attempt to fill some gaps. Like Asha said and like Aloka said, there was no doubt that our immediate concern was to first address the health needs. We started to tap our existing partners to see what they were thinking about, how they were co-funding and co-designing with others, and how they would be willing to co-fund and co-design with us. And that quickly became an exercise to just address some of the immediate concerns that were out there. Over time, we did transition to think more about the economic aspects of the recovery. And we're still thinking about those, and we're still working our way through all of that. But it's become increasingly clear that as we start to work with corporates that we've been strongly associated with over the last several years, that their CSR funds can be used in innovative ways to be effective in the economic recovery. Certainly, we're going to need those CSR funds to address the immediate needs, but we may also need those CSR funds to help unlock more capital in India. And that capital can be coming from NBFCs or banks or others. And we have to be creative on where we play in this entire spectrum, this entire trajectory of capital that's going to be needed to help recover. And I think that there are all sorts of ways. You described one earlier in your remarks, Priya, with returnable grants. Great example. On that trajectory, there could be grants, there could be returnable grants, there could be some sort of coupling for maybe unlocking loans through a loan guarantee program. There could be opportunities to get involved with innovative finance, development impact bonds or others, and then even commercial capital that's going to be necessary. So we at the mission have been involved in a wide variety of ways to use CSR and our money, where we're co-funding and co-designing over the last several years. And now we're attempting to ensure we're doing that through a COVID lens.
Thank you, Nehal. And Asha, just back to you, right? I think Nehal talked a lot about unlocking financial resources for this recovery, but both Caterpillar and HSBC have an outstanding network of employees who, understandably are going through their own share of transition. But I know that your employees have really stepped up to also respond to community needs. So if you can talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. Employees and our dealer employees as well. I was just looking at the numbers before I got on the call. It's about a little over about 11,000 across the country. Definitely, they are pivotal to our engagement in the communities. So ranging from, we have a series we call Meet the Doers, and these are employees working with nonprofits to really leverage their skills to be able to come up with really innovative ways in which you can support the pandemic. We have solutions that are currently looking at 3D printing of masks, and how do you get that quickly into the hands of healthcare workers to folks just sewing them at their homes and sending it. So you can kind of see innovation working all the way from leveraging technology to just folks doing the best they can to be able to support their communities. But I would say that works within the ethos of the company. And I've been with Caterpillar for a little over a year, and it always surprises me, and it's just amazing to see the response that you see of employees across the globe coming together. And as you said, Priya, they themselves, we all are going through this, but yet reaching out to see how can we support our communities. Right now, we have the United Way campaign that's in effect. And before we got on this panel, we were talking about, what a component of United Way is all about: volunteering and coming together and collaborating. But given the situation that we're in, our employees really stepped up to be creative in looking at virtual volunteering opportunities, leveraging technology to be able to reach out to nonprofit organizations in their communities. So much so that I know we have a day of volunteering, but I think this pandemic has really shown how our employees step up, not just in their talent, but also in their resources. With the matching gifts program, we ran a 2-to-1 matching gifts during the height of the pandemic when it had hit in early March, as we were talking about. But the response that we saw from our employees were pretty immense, to see how they were stepping up to support their community. So a couple of things I would say from an employee engagement and leadership engagement is really in that collaboration with multiple sectors. But also the creativity that comes in the time of crisis, and also leveraging the DNA of the company. Where can we leverage technology, whether they're gen sets or even their own skill set, to be able to support communities?
Yeah, no, I love those examples, right? And that's a lot of hope in there, because just people who are going through their own set of challenges to step up and have not just the empathy, but then dedicate the time and the effort to respond to the needs of others. Aloka, you talked about, how your senior leadership, your CEO, your employee base really stepped up to support NGO leaders, to help think through their resilience and their business continuity processes. So tell us a little bit more about, how that journey has been, and just really how both sides have now come together, because it's kind of, all of us trying to do our best collectively right now.
So I think Asha has already mentioned, in terms of, companies like ours, we have a large workforce. They come together and can actually make a huge difference. This time it's been quite interesting because, I think this is the time when corporate expertise can be of huge help to the sector. Because the fact is that, one of our leaders actually reached out to us saying, you're talking about business continuity. How do you go about it? How easy or difficult is it to do it for a company, and how easy or difficult it is to do it for a or not for profit? So I think it's now time to kind of use the expertise that we have, in-house expertise, to build capacity of our of the partners or the social sector at large. So one, of course, is the fact that this is one point I go on talking about, the business continuity part. So that's something which actually we are working internally, and we would want that to be transferred to the social sector and see that how they can work on it. Second is technology. I think there's a huge amount of today, if you ask, companies like ours have been able to face this only because of the investment that has been made in technology. The social sector, I think there are challenges in using technology, but that's something which is going to be an imperative going forward. How you do it, how you address it, is not going to happen overnight. But I think that's another space where we will see a lot of internal expertise being used to build, again, strengthen the social sector. The third part that we are looking at is actually, Priya, you're aware, we have a very large skilling portfolio. And we have a program called HSBC Skills for Life, and we have invested in it since 2012, and even much more since 2015. And we work with a very, very large number of partners across the country. Now, the other thing that we've seen is that the skills partners is very important, that employees can get involved, both in terms of building capacity to keep them motivated. Because currently what is happening is, this is one sector which has got really badly hit. People have lost their jobs. Youth who have been trained have lost their jobs. Sectors which were driving a lot of employment, like hospitality, retail, and others, are going to now create less jobs. So now the thing is that I think employees will play a very important role to give this information to us, in terms of, particularly from a banking perspective, which are the sectors which are coming up, so that, we can integrate into our program. So that's another thing that we are going to look at. I'll just touch upon one quick thing, is that, what we are seeing going forward is that the programs, CSR programs, are going to change quite a bit. I think technology will become integral. I think healthcare, which Nehal spoke about, will become integral to any program that we are doing. And the third point I'm reiterating is the fact that expertise of corporates that we have, that's going to become much more handy to build much stronger institutions in the social sector.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Aloka. And really, I mean, great examples of saying, how are you really leveraging your technology, your expertise, your employee base to proactively kind of reach out to the large NGO community that you currently work with. Nehal, if I may turn to you, I mean, clearly this crisis has disproportionately impacted women, right? I mean, the impact on gender has been horrifying, particularly in an Indian context. So if you could tell us a little bit about, how USAID is thinking about its gender response, particularly in the next few months.
Absolutely. There is no doubt that vulnerable communities, including women and girls, of course, have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. And like I mentioned earlier, we're not necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel with how we operate as an agency. What we are trying to do is look at things through a COVID lens and make sure that everything we're doing now, even if it was something that existed before or planned from before, now does look at the impact of COVID through a recovery standpoint, through a health standpoint, and from the gender side. I'll give you a couple of examples of what we've recently talked about globally. Just about 3 weeks ago, we announced through the White House a series of partnerships under the WGDP program, or what's called the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Program. And those partnerships were about interventions that perhaps were planned several months before COVID. But now each of those have an extra COVID lens. Some of those partnerships, for example, are with corporates using CSR funds, partnerships with PepsiCo, Microsoft, MasterCard. And one of those partnerships, for example, deals with bridging the gender digital divide, upskilling and reskilling and opportunities for us to now look at COVID to really empower women in India specifically. This particular partnership that I'm referring to is with Reliance Foundation, and it's an opportunity to again address where the digital divide exists in India, to support nonprofits in India that are going to be looking at COVID, but also looking at how we can really use this as an opportunity. I mean, throughout this whole panel, Priya, I loved how you positioned this challenge as an opportunity, and Asha's done the same thing, and Aloka's done the same thing, and we want to do the same thing. This is an opportunity like never seen before. Let's really use this opportunity with strong partners to make a strong dent in the gender digital divide in India. And we can't do it alone. And in my opinion, I don't even think government can do it alone. I think we all need to be working together, multi-stakeholder platforms with the private sector, civil society, all of us plugging in somewhere in that trajectory that I mentioned before. And I think some of our WGDP partnerships are great examples of that.
And I couldn't have said it better myself, right? So, just inspiring work from all three of you, and really outstanding examples of how you're leveraging all kinds of resources that you have, the networks, the funds, the employee expertise to really make, very significant difference to the communities around you. Thank you very much for being here. And I would, also thank you to USISPF. Over to you, Malaki. Yeah, I don't know what went wrong there, but just wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for your time. Have a great weekend. I know it's a long weekend in the US, so enjoy all of you. Really a pleasure being here. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the opportunity. And thank you again, USISPF. Thank you.